Silverized Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast, the podcast where we look at films to find the ancient themes behind our modern issues. We're looking at a delightful short film today, David Lynch's What Did Jack Do? It's the movie where he talks to a monkey for about 15 minutes. And you may think to yourself, what the hell could they find to talk about with this movie that's relevant to my life, to my modern human life? We're going to tell you. We're going to speak about why this conversation in the film has such a sense of being an interrogation and how that relates to the way we speak to each other now, where every question is heavy and every moray and belief is up for debate. We're also going to speak about one of the important elements in this film, absurdism, and how absurdism has never made more sense in our modern times. So let's jump right in to the word of the podcast.
The word of the podcast this episode is going to be absurd, plainly illogical, from the 1550s, from the French. And then before that, from the Latin. Out of tune or discordant, figuratively incongruous, foolish, silly, senseless. Little word breakdown for you. Latin, you have ab, which is a prefix, meaning off or away from. And then the rest of the word, the Proto-Indo. They just say pi root, but pi, I don't think people understand it. Proto-Indo-European root, meaning to buzz or whisper.
You scoffed at me for doing my vocal warm-ups. And I would like to suggest that next time you join me in saying the tip of the tongue and the teeth on the lips. So you can say Proto-European Indo language with finesse and smooth jazz effect as I now can.
So some of your vocal exercises sound absurd, but they're useful, and I understand that. Back to words. So the basic sense is out of tune, maybe. Deaf often has two semantic sides. This is the last thing I want to say about this word. So the one who cannot hear, but also one who is not heard. So absurdus can be explained as which is unheard of. And then you can always say, when someone, if you were, say, like lived 100 years ago or whatever in maybe Britain or something, and someone did something that was absurd, you might say, that's unheard of. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of. We still use it today. Sometimes I say that, And there's some affront to the dignity of being. And I would say that's unheard of. Absurd. It means absurd.
Well, you know what it makes me think of? This idea of being, what is it? Being unheard and what was the other one? It was like two versions of it.
Right. So, because,
Just say it.
Well, I'm reading it. Since deaf often has two semantic sides. Are you following me on this? Because it sounds, so surdus means dull, deaf, or mute. S-U-R-D-U-S. So ab, away from, and then surdus, dull, deaf, mute, which is possibly from an imitative Proto-Indo-European root, meaning to buzz or whisper. Okay, so the basic sense is perhaps out of tune.
There's something really interesting about this idea of out of tune, not heard of in a literal sense, because it makes me think of the philosophical idea of absurdism, which there is a kind of individualistic, not solipsistic in the true definition, but purely individualistic, bordering on nihilistic understanding of the world through the absurdist lens, right? Which is like nothing genuinely has any meaning. And because of that, it is whatever you decide to make it mean. And there's an absurdity in your ability to make things mean whatever they want. And it's kind of this like, so YOLO, Absurdism to me is the YOLO of existentialism. And I think that was very well embodied by Camus, who lived it up very much so. And so this idea of being unheard of and absurd, having this link, it's almost like you cannot be fully understood. There is, and that's absurd, right? For something to be absurd is to not be able to be understood. And I find that there seems to be this connection, like almost it's like, I don't know if you would say metaphorical for that, like this kind of idea of you're not understood. You live in your own world. Absurdism.
Well, this film, I think, does something interesting. And it's a brief note that I had on it also was, so this film made a lot of sense to me. And that may be more of a
Personal problem.
But I don't think so. Because you can use absurdism to make a lot of points. I just think it requires a different mindset going into it. This is a short 17-minute film by David Lynch, a director that I have a great deal of
You're not gonna shirk my vocal exercises from now on. You shame yourself.
I've shamed myself.
Yeah, he is a great director. Now,
Thank you.
But what's interesting about this film, and as soon as I started watching it, I was like, have I had a stroke? Because it's very nonsensical. It's a very, in a way, nonsensical film, particularly for the dialogue.
It's not nonsensical, though.
It's not, but it is. It's not, but it is, right? So it's a monkey speaking, and the monkey is like dating a chicken, and did the monkey murder someone? And then a lot of the dialogue, there's strange like turns of phrase that are thrown in there, and sometimes things don't exactly answer each other, but they do at the same time. There is still this ability to have them connected. So it's almost like a language that's not a language.
Well, yeah. So
you should go on. You should speak about the cut up method, because you should have covered this at this point, because we're talking about the dialogue.
Yeah, so author William Burroughs was known for writing several novels using this thing called the cut-up method, which he had, I think, taken from a painter, which was using it, whose name I can't recall,
Brian
and I can't pronounce his name. I'm not sure. So I think that he was influenced by that guy, and he would basically write text, and then he would physically cut it up, and then rearrange it randomly, and found that there is other meanings that could be extrapolated from that text which had been rearranged. Now, I read those novels a long time ago, and it's not particularly easygoing, but that might say something about language itself, which I'm not prepared to delve into fully. But, the film, there is an overarching thing that brings it together, which is it's this kind of old detective interrogation of a criminal, and kind of an old-timey 1940s
feel too. Yeah,
noir type setting with the hard-boiled detective. Now obviously the fact that he's speaking to a monkey, sure, that's the absurdity of it. But I stood transfixed. I watched the entire short film standing up, and I think that it might segue into one of the broader point we wanted to make about there's something to me anyway. And again, it could always just be my own state of mind. There is something to me reflective of the overall media environment, overall communication environment, the overall conversation that we're trying to have, not just me and you.
You made an interesting point here. When I looked at your notes, the idea of why conversation feels like an interrogation, and not all conversation per se, but there is a jumping off point that this movie provides, because what you're watching is a conversation. The entire film is essentially a conversation. There's really no action until the very ending. And so it really makes you consider what a conversation is? What is that? What is and it's something that's colored by intention. It's something that's colored by the technical aspects of it, whether you use language, how you use language, the tone of voice, and that's where the nonsense part of the conversation comes in, because it shows, okay, what if we remove this? What if we don't speak normally, and we speak in this kind of like roundabout turn of phrases and kind of like absurd style of speaking, but it's still a conversation and it still progresses nonetheless, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like it makes sense. And so it makes you think of what a conversation can really be. And this I think about a lot, because I think that particularly now, where so many of our conversations are happening in online mediums that are heavily restricted, whether it's character limits or simply just that it's text with no body language behind it, all of these things alter what a conversation is. They add something, they take something away, and they change conversation. But a culture also can change conversation. And I think this is kind of what you're talking about, in the way that, do our conversations feel more like interrogations now? I like this idea, because it does feel like we're living in a time where even when you speak with your own friends, depending on, how you see eye to eye to them, whatever, hopefully you have friends that you can speak brutally, honestly, and directly without having to kind of suss out, what do they think about this? Is it okay if we talk about this? Because that's exhausting. That takes away from the conversation, because you're having to do kind of this background work in your mind about having the conversation. But this idea of conversation as becoming more of an interrogation, why do you think that?
Because so many fundamental values and things which the culture used to take for granted have become upended and are being questioned. And this was the example I gave when we were going back and forth about some of these issues, was that I had a friend who texted me at 7 a.m. and said, "What?" It was something along the lines of book banning. What's your opinion? And it's a friend that I've known for a long time and respect, and intelligent person, and we don't see eye to eye on several things, maybe politically or this or that, but we have good conversations. But see, the problem is that, first, the problem is why it's the year 2022, and it's unfortunate that question even has to be raised. It's a little unfortunate that question has to be. I understand why, right? Because I think this person was saying, in the context of school districts, I guess, were banning particular texts that they found offensive or whatever. I don't really know a great deal about that, and so but do you see? We're in a position now where at 7 a.m. I get a text message, which I'm not awake. Number one, sometimes I'm not even asleep yet, but also, how can I answer that? Number one, how can I answer that via text message?
Yeah.
And so this is what I've been kind of going over multiple times in this podcast. Is that in and of itself
absurd?
Right,
that's an absurd question. And not to say that the idea is absurd, it's not. But there's something absurdist about receiving a text message at 7 a.m. asking about a deeply fraught and complex and important and historically, grounded topic.
And I want to give this person credit, though I of course would never give anyone's name. But this person said, as a joke, they said, "Tell me in one sentence."
Yeah,
joke.
yeah.
So they know,
they know, yeah.
We all know that we're kind of trapped in these. In whether it's Twitter or text messaging or any of this stuff, we're boxed in by. We have freedom now because we can communicate with people so much more frequently, so much easier. But we're forgetting that there are limitations to the way that we can communicate now when we're not talking face to face.
We're adopting the limitations. as just factual realities.
Unthinkingly.
Yes, exactly. That's something that I've started to consider, is how we adapt to those limitations as if they are our own limitations. They just become part of the way that we communicate. I have a friend that will sometimes, if I'm texting something, he will tell me this should be a phone call. And sometimes I'm like, but I actually appreciate that, because it reminds me, no, this is actually right. You should try to have the fullest types of communication as often as possible. If it's like, hey, should I pick up eggs from the grocery store? That'll be fine in a text message. But we get used to being crippled by these new forms of communication. We just kind of adapt to the way that they limit us without realizing in many ways how much they do limit us, particularly with social media. I think Twitter is one of the best examples of this, because I bet you there are so many conversations or debates or whatever that would not go in a certain direction if they were in person, or even on the phone, or even in a video, chat type of style, where you're getting body language, you're getting real-time voice, as opposed to just text anonymously that's character limited.
So we have along with this problem of the constraints of new modes of communication, we also find ourselves, I think, to some degree, in a time where a lot of fundamental questions are being asked. Questions like, do you believe in book banning?
It actually is so absurd.
So you have it. You're limited by the way you can speak, because of I can't, for a variety of reasons, answer that question in a way that would do justice to it. But also, we're having to ask these more fundamental questions. So it's a very dangerous situation.
Restrictive mediums.
Because if the majority of the stuff we were talking about right now is whatever you said, pick up eggs from the store or something, it wouldn't matter.
Fine,
but now we have restrictive mediums and the necessity, apparently, to question fundamental things having to do with governance, culture, all these types of things, which leads us to this format, the format of the podcast.
Yeah.
Which has its own limitations and problems, but it feels much more expansive.
It's much more natural too. That's the thing that's why I get so uppity about any attempts to censor, particularly video and audio, because I think they are the more natural forms of communication. So they allow for much more of the nuance that you might, if you really wanted to make the argument about, misinformation, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's going to be more likely that something's going to be conveyed inaccurately in 140 characters than in a 3-hour video of a conversation. So I find that to be backwards in a way, that, this medium is the one that requires censorship. Not that it's not being done on all fronts, but it's a strange thing to think that genuine conversation like we're having now is somehow going to be problematic, whereas this is literally what we do as human beings. We speak to each other back and forth over a span of time that we sit together. So, but of course this has limitations because we're speaking for many people at the same time. So there's degrees to which this is different from me and you sitting in a room and just talking, of course. But either way, that there is something really funny about that. And you wrote in your notes, how can I be anything other than the monkey in responding to that text message at 7 a.m. about whether banning books is good? And I think that that's something that really is such a cool visual in a way, that the monkey is the absurdist David Lynch monkey is kind of who we all should strive to be right now, because there is something absurd in a dark way, like masochistically absurd, about us trying to debate ethics and the role of government and rehash the entire constitution of our country and culture in 280 characters on Twitter. That's like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And of course, what can you do when a medium becomes that dominant? And it allows people, of course, to have a conversation, whereas otherwise there would be none. So that's the thing, right? It's like, so there just wouldn't be anything in that place otherwise of Twitter. It wouldn't be like, oh, well, we could just have a massive worldwide lecture or something where everybody's calling in. There's nothing else like that. This is actually the best thing we have right now for mass communication in real time in that kind of public format. But it's still really,
I'm still
really
not
bad.
convinced I'm still not convinced that's
I'm not
good.
Either.
I'm not convinced. I'm also understand the pros. Look, with many things there are pros and cons. Now, I don't remember if I had a kind of analogy about Twitter, and I'm not sure if I actually told you about it on a previous podcast. Did I tell you about how I think of Twitter as kind of a haunted asylum?
No.
So oftentimes you talk about Twitter, and I don't use Twitter, so I thought I don't remember. I was out on the porch, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, every time I hear her talking about this is what I think. I think of myself standing on a hill, and off in the distance is a decrepit, scary, gigantic complex that is known to be the old asylum, and everybody knows it's the old asylum. And you see the windows are illuminated, but it's dark at night, and you see like people walking back and forth across there, and it's scary. And and then you come up to me and you say, "What?" And you say, "What's that?" Or I say, "What's that?" And you say, "That's Twitter." And I say, "Okay, well," and then you say, "I'm going to go in there," and I'm like, "Well, why would look at it? You just told me it's full of insane, angry people. It's full of anger and insane people." And you say, "Yeah, but I got to go in." And I say, "Well, what?" Look, I mean,
well, okay, to be
why
fair,
are you going in? And then you just keep on going in. And at some point, the person on the hill who's not going into the asylum has to say, "Go forth and do your best, and I wish you the best." But you know what you're getting into.
Yeah. I mean, it is that way. And there's an argument too that's maybe coming down the pipes here that is, should we just all get off of this? Like, should we just all stop? Now, of course, this is the kind of thing that it's like, first of all, probably not half the country, but like a significant portion of people are legitimately addicted to social media. So that's something that we'll have to reckon with as a people soon. It's not really like, it's a budding issue that I think is getting spoken about more in regards to children, teenagers and whatnot, but it's like, let's not pretend that there are not adults who spend all day on their phones and that are ruining their lives by doing such.
Not many, though. There can't be that many, because anyone who would do that is already most likely fucked, though. Because if it's not Twitter, it's going to be something else. So
yeah, fair enough.
And look, I'm no expert on Twitter. I'm just the person on the hill pointing out.
I'd rather do heroin than fucking Twitter, man. If you gotta be addicted to something, come on. Like, first of all, at least heroin is like, I think it's fun. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't tried it, but like, looks like it's more fun than Twitter. Okay.
I think you could probably.
They're about equal.
I think that. Well, I'm not going to give medical advice. Let me put it this way. You can probably. It's an open question whether or not that you can do extraordinarily hard drugs for long periods of time and have the same health outcomes as using Twitter.
Hey, man, a lot of people
I say it's an open
using
question.
Twitter for long periods of time have noticeable declines in their well-being. So
I think
it is an open question.
And maybe mix and match. A little heroin and a little Twitter. Maybe it balances out. It's kind of the informational speedball.
Your dopamine destruction diet. So let's go on now to absurdism and why absurdism has never made more sense for our culture. Now, this movie is definitely absurd. In the traditional sense of absurdist art. And there is something really refreshing. When you said, you were like, I like this movie, I'm enjoying it. And I started watching it. At first I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to find something to speak about that's relevant to modern life by watching a monkey and David Lynch have a conversation? And yet I realized that that's exactly what's relevant to modern life. Because there's something so refreshing about an absurd movie during a time when everything that really doesn't need to be that serious is being blown up to level 100, whether it's a podcast and offensive episodes and whatnot, or some celebrity saying the wrong thing, or some new movie, or some new headline, whatever it is, everything is turned up to 100 and treated like it's the end of the world. Everything is being taken so seriously. I mean, to the point that comedians can't be comedians anymore without being under constant scrutiny. And it's just like, can we lighten up? Can we lighten the fuck up? I mean, there's slave camps in China. There are children being sex trafficked still all over the world. Those are things that exist in the real world. So maybe let's lighten up about, offensive podcasts and what the fuck ever. Because there are real problems, like really real problems. And there is something that is just purely absurd about a country like the United States that has so much freedom, material wealth, and fairly high quality of life compared to most of the world, acting like the world is ending over podcasts and headlines and words and everything is violence now. That's another thing. Not to be gruff or harsh, but sometimes I guess not. I was going to say, a little war sometimes helps people get their perspective straight. Like a little war on your soil kind of gets people's perspective straight. Like, this thing of, everything is violence now. Well, maybe that's only for people that literally don't actually have violence in their lives, right? Because if you lived 100 years ago, or you lived in a place that actually still has landmines or has legitimate gang violence, you don't say things like words are violence. You don't, because you have the spectrum filled out where you know what real violence is, and that's really serious. And it makes saying that words are violence seem absolutely absurd. And so absurdism seems like exactly what we need in our culture right now, because I don't see any other way to deal with the kind of delusional urgency that a country with so much more in terms of freedom, material wealth, all of that, than most places in the world, acting like the world is ending. It's truly just absurd.
But remember, it's very important to remember this. If you walk outside your front door, for the most part, I don't walk outside the front door and hear people screaming, "Censor Joe Rogan." Like, I've never heard it, or whatever it may be. Like, I've never walked outside and heard. Now, you live in Los Angeles.
Florida,
maybe it's different.
And I live in LA.
But realistically, people in Los Angeles don't just start screaming things like that into the void.
No, they scream it online.
That's what I'm getting at, is that
yeah, I don't buy that anymore. I'm kind of tired of that argument that in the real world they're not doing, because in the real world people just shut up because they actually don't say what they think and they're not willing to stand by their beliefs. They just go along with whatever there is at the moment, which can be both a very big problem and also a good thing if the moment is peaceful and generally orderly. But the thing is that these people that keep to themselves during being out in the real world and are not in the grocery store screaming cancel Joe Rogan or whatever, but are online doing that pressure online seems to be enough to get corporations to make changes. And when you have the actual government hinting at these ideas of pressuring corporations to censor and to make changes in line with what would be beneficial for some political narrative, where are they getting that steam from? It's from the people screaming into the online world. There's something about that. There's something we have to grapple with, the fact that has weight now. It's nice that it's not outside my door. That would be actual chaos. But it's enough now. It's enough now for there to be these outrages online. And, they fade away and it's great and whatever. But a lot of the time they do damage to people.
It's just an excuse used that people are just leveraging. People in power are just leveraging a very small amount of people that get outraged in order to do whatever they want. Just like you said, I think that the question was the White House press secretary or something intimated that more censorship. Look, they then become, but this is what I like about all this, is that they set themselves up into a trap, which is similar to the David Lynch movie of a guy talking to a monkey at a table. The White House press secretary, they find it necessary to talk about censoring a guy who does MMA stuff and was a comedian. So,
yeah.
Do you see that it's
absurd.
I'm feeling better these days. I don't know. I'm not. I do. I feel like there are dangers and there are problems, and yes, the conversation is absurd, and yes, I understand Twitter is Twitter and all that, but I feel like winning is not the right word, but I feel like people are kind of seeing the absurdity of some of these things, and they're just not going along with it anymore.
Yeah, you know? I agree. I agree that I actually do agree that even that kind of like pressure from the White House and these statements and this, even the entire campaign in this particular instance, as one, recent example of these kind of like demands and illiberal pressure in the culture, I do think it will backfire. My only fear with these things is always that they create enough of a smokescreen to allow changes to occur that are lasting and legitimately damaging.
Like what?
Like actually having, like setting a precedent where the government starts to chime in on whether private companies need to censor themselves, and also creating a distraction for the culture from things like the Epstein trial. Like, we're distracted. We're talking about censoring a comedian's podcast now, and we're completely turning away from the legitimate corruption in government and in the highest levels of society. Like,
hey, don't worry about it. As Bill Gates said in a recent interview, when I asked, he said, he's dead. That was his response. Totally normal way to answer a question like that. Hey, you were maybe on an island with this guy, and his answer is he's dead. Okay, well, so
don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
That's what I'm gonna say now. Whenever someone asks me a question, I'll just say he's dead. Don't worry about it. See how that goes on.
I'm going to quote this movie.
I get away with it.
I'm going to quote this movie. I want to give this finally to everybody as something they can do. This movie, which is a great movie, and everyone, I endorse 17 minutes. It's on Netflix, which I'm not a huge fan of, but hey, I would like to, my favorite quote is simply, I read the newspapers. That's what I'm going to say from now on. People are going to send me text messages about this or that event of the day or whatever it is that is the coal furnace of Twitter. They're just shoveling in the outrage coal. That's what I think of it. I'm just going to respond, I read the papers, because that's what that's what he says to the detective.
Monkey, man, just all his answers are right, even though they're absurd. That's the thing. Like, that monkey's got swag, as they said in the early 2000s. Now, listen, here's the one thing. Yeah, I miss. That's what I want to talk about, actually, is the joy that has been lost in our culture. A friend of mine told me recently, like, oh, you should see the new Jackass movie. And I was like, oh, shit. I forgot that we had a time in our culture. Do you remember, like, the shows on MTV that were just, like, a bunch of dudes breaking shit and breaking themselves? Jackass was one. There's also Bam Margera's show, whatever his name, Viva La Bam, and he's just like skateboarding off of like buildings and shit and like pranking his like obese father like violently. And we're all just like, that's fucking hilarious. Now it would be like, this is elder abuse. This is toxic masculinity. Men doing things with their bodies and skateboards and having too much fun. Like, there was such laid backness.
But I don't know any real human being. And again, I understand. I live in Florida, and I'm like, I look like I should be in the trucker convoy. I get it. I understand. But have you ever had anyone actually come to you and say something like, I don't like Jackass or whatever this other movie is because there's elder abuse in it? Has anyone ever said that out loud, or have they only typed it on glass to Twitter?
Fair enough.
I mean, I get it. Look, you can bring up questions. I didn't get into the Jackass thing.
It's just hard because I live online. Like,
yeah,
part
but
of me lives online. What do I do,
There's
man?
the asylum in the distance, and I keep telling you don't walk in.
My job is in the asylum. I work in the asylum partially. Like, what are we're doing? We're making content for the asylum right now.
No,
how can I not think of the patients when I make things?
What Twitter should be, maybe, is just a place to promote things like long-form podcasts so that then people can... I don't think Twitter is a place, and again, no expert here, don't use it, but it's probably not a place for conversation.
I don't have conversations. I just speak to myself. I just monologue it out,
Isn't that... Like, okay, so now, I just want to take this analogy of the asylum and then take that sentence. I just speak to myself. Now...
Well, isn't writing also speaking to yourself, like, period? So, look.
There's something wrong. I don't know what it is yet, but...
That's true. There is something wrong on many levels. Look, this is the thing now. Like, I recently heard that, that old show, Big Brother, like the first reality show where they put people in a house and, like, watch them.
I didn't watch that either.
Yeah, I didn't watch it either.
I was reading books instead of watching Big Brother and Jackass. Maybe that's another problem.
No, Jackass was good for you. Jackass was good for people to watch because we need more of that. Like, bring back a little toxic masculinity. Just a little, just a little, so that, like, men can actually do things in the culture and not be like, I'm a feminist. I'm
going to have to take umbrage. I think you're trying to get men to go hurt themselves online for your amusement. Is this... What is going on here?
Toxic femininity.
I don't understand.
Hey, those guys are rich, though, so it worked out for them.
So Jackass was absurd. Yeah, I mean,
Jackass was absurd.
Yeah, I can't remember that much about it. I do. I mean, I understand. Like, they would ride tricycles off cliffs and stuff.
Yeah, they're just,
it's kind of funny. And it's kind of funny. Yeah, it is kind of
fun, man. It was fun.
Is that absurd?
Like, there was a TV channel of people just, like, willingly creating absurd situations in which they would harm themselves joyously, okay? So
I'm pretty sure you could find that going on today online if you looked for it.
Online,
fair.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah, I know.
If that's your cup of tea.
I should bring it back. I want to make it. What if we make... What if
I don't aspire to riding a tricycle off a cliff, though.
Jackass. Can women do Jackass?
It would probably not be as funny, but yes, you can.
No, I don't think it would. Yeah, I don't
Canceled.
know.
So anyway, you can clip that out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
I just
but okay. I said that to be offensive, but it probably is true that, like,
going there.
Yeah, why not? Women, like, damaging themselves online, because that's what the Jackass people did, right?
They cry right away. Also, like, all the women I know immediately cry for everything, including myself. So it would kind of be sad, if women did Jackass. Like, I know there's gonna be women that are like, I never cry in my life. It's like, okay, then do Jackass. Make it. We need you. We need you to go harm yourselves like the men are doing so we can have female Jackass. Again, the feminism. I want equality. I want to be like men. Okay, ride a tricycle off a fucking cliff and make Jackass ladies Jackass. Like, let's go. Where are they? So
it is a question. I wonder why that isn't. Maybe it is a thing.
I mean, I think it's a sex difference. I think men... that's one of the things. I think there's research behind men being more risk prone and doing shit like that and whatever, and women not doing shit like that.
It wouldn't be as funny, though, would it? Like, if you really think about it, if it was an all-female cast of people mildly harming themselves, there's something weird.
We like to see men get hurt. That's the thing. There is a degree to which it's just...
problem.
Not in a fucked up war way. Like, willing. It's got to be consent. It's all about consent. The thing is... It's funny when the Jackass guys, like, accidentally smash their balls with, like,
that's
a
funny
skateboard or something.
You maybe more.
It's funny to them, too. They do it, too. They're doing it.
They're doing it for money. Look, anyway,
It's not funny if a woman is like injured, you know, because then it's just like. Shit.
So then what I said stands. It wouldn't be as funny.
I don't think
If-
it would. I don't.
women-
Maybe I need to make it. I need to make it and do it. I'm not gonna be the one to do it though, because like,
you're
I don't
not.
like
Of
getting
course you're
hurt.
not. Right. No one's going to do that. I don't think it would be popular. I really don't. And that maybe we could explore in another podcast episode. Right now, I don't think we need to speculate on why an all-female Jackass remake would be a great idea.
Well, here's the thing.
But-
I'm just making the point that I think that, you know, there's a weird shift in our culture from where entertainment was joyous and absurd and ridiculous to now that the Big Brother thing, the reason I brought it up was that there's like every episode now or every season gets deconstructed as like, is this a facet of racism? Like, is this a facet of sexism? And it's like, oh my God, who are these people that are watching reality TV and trying to write, you know, a critical theory dissertation on it? Like,
Is that show still on?
yeah, it's still running.
Okay,
yeah.
so again, I could...
No one has fun. No one has fun anymore, man.
One part of the audience, to answer your question, one part of the audience is people who still know that show is on. And I am not a part of that cohort. Because to some degree,
You're not a part of many cohorts.
Well, you know,
first of all.
and proudly so. I'm sorry that I'm not, you know, interested in Big Brother. I mean, isn't it kind of for dummies? I mean, it's like all that shit's kind of a little bit for dummies. So
Well, sometimes you gotta dumb it out, man. That's
Sure,
the thing.
have fun here
I
and there.
watch trash TV when I go to visit my family. Something that I love to do with my sister is watch like this like trash TV, like 90 Day Fiance and shit like that. That's just dumb, you know? Because it's like you just want to massage the old brain a little bit, you know? Let it smooth brain moment when you're.
I'd like
hanging
to
out.
see the demographic breakdown in terms of gender on viewers of what you just termed trash TV, which I won't say.
You are gonna get canceled.
I can't because I don't fucking have a Twitter account. So do you understand that it doesn't matter? Anyone could yell at me as much as they wanted on Twitter, and I don't exist there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true, man. Who fucking cares, you know? Who fucking cares? I like, you know, Rogan.
I asked a question. I want an answer.
He posted some video that was like yelling at an ice cream on fire in some fancy restaurant. It was like, meanwhile, I'm like, see, that's how you do it. A bunch of people are like pulling out their hair and trying to destroy the Constitution because of Rogan. And he's like eating fancy ice cream on fire while high. It's a fucking, that's the move. I don't have an answer to your question about what
do
is it
some
you want to know.
research.
Let's not, because we need to speak about absurdism.
Are you afraid of the answer? I just want to know who watches. I didn't know that Big Brother was a television show that was still on.
Women like to see people in relationships. That's the thing. All these reality shows and things like that, they are geared towards a female audience, I assume, because women care about, you know, relationships. We're interested. That's like, they tend to be more, you know, aligned towards that, whereas men are like action, you know, which is why they watched Jackass before. Now we have maybe more female fucking studio execs, so now we've got a bunch of Big Brother and we got no more Jackass. So there you go, equality.
So if, and here we're just speculating, I'm not trying to say anything controversial, if it's true, and this is total speculation because you won't apparently just look up the answer, if that audience skews a bit more to the female side of things, and your explanation is correct, that, you know, women tend to care more about relationships and that kind of thing. Well,
what is your point? What do you want?
Nothing. I'm done drawing conclusions from this.
Yeah,
Move on.
You're getting dangerous. Conclusions are very close to illegal at this point. So, you know, don't conclude. Just sit there and consume. That's what.
Well, I was trying to answer. There's a reason then that a certain portion of that audience will be writing essays on Twitter about, you know, whatever.
Are women ruining everything?
Gender dystopia or whatever in Big Brother season, whatever it is, 30 or something. I mean,
is that the premise? Have women gone too far?
I don't think it's gone too far. I think you hit something correct, which is that, well, let's. I read the newspapers. I'm done. I'm done. Actually, I should remember what when you're being interrogated, just shut up and plead the fifth. I'm good.
Anyway, this is not a podcast about women. It's a podcast about absurdism, which maybe it's the same thing. I don't know, man. I don't want to talk about women because they're also absurd, but we all are. That's the thing. I just wish that people would lighten the fuck up, like I need to lighten the fuck up. You know that? That's what I realized today. I realized today that I put so much pressure on everything that I do, on everything that's going on, and it's like I don't enjoy anything. Oh, you said that recently. And Hedonia, you too also were not enjoying things. Okay, so don't be over there like, you should figure it out. You too do not enjoy things as much as you once did.
Yeah, but this has been a decades-long struggle over here. This isn't because Twitter made me sad one day. This is probably a chemical imbalance.
Well, fair enough. My problems have been coming along. I don't know, man. I swear, ever since I moved to LA, the pandemic, that's it. I moved to LA only shortly before the pandemic. And then it seems ever since the pandemic, I just feel like I live under so much pressure, even though it's so totally self-imposed. For some reason, everything feels incredibly intense and heightened. And I'm trying to have fun. I'm trying to lighten it up because here's the thing. I don't see any other realistic option for dealing with our problems as a culture, as a people, as a country, but to mock and to laugh at ourselves because it's truly silly and absurd that during a time where we have there's so much that we have that it's not even that, people didn't have this before. It's that many people right now don't have it. Like just having air conditioning, having safe drinking water. Now, of course, there's people in the country that don't have air conditioning or safe drinking water. I know. But they have a better chance of getting it here than they do if they're like in some poor rural village in a dangerous country. There's that. So, I mean, I'd rather have not safe drinking water here than not safe drinking water in some place where it's very unlikely that I will ever get it. Offensive? I don't know. Strategic in my mind. And I'd like to help those people that don't have what they could have here. But I don't think that losing my fucking mind about podcasts and whatever is actually going to help that. So that's what I think is such a problem. It's like we're so intense about things that absolutely are trivial compared to the grand scheme of life and compared to the history of human beings, the suffering that human beings endure today, that it seems like it genuinely distracts us and pulls us away from being able to solve real problems for people that have real problems right now.
But this was a point that I should have made earlier, and then I think that I'm going to conclude this episode. So it was that, sadly and unfortunately, there's also maybe another driving impulse to make what we could say a storm in a team
cream bowl,
a storm in a cream bowl. It's because it's actually kind of difficult to get clean water to people and healthcare and reasonable jobs. That's hard, and it's probably to some degree people don't get recognition when they actually do solve problems like that. Mm-hmm. So the part that I see a problem with is that sometimes everyone is, chattering about Joe Rogan or whatever because it's easy. Mm-hmm. Because it's way easier to get mad at Joe Rogan or whatever it is you want to get mad at in the day than to solve these other problems. Yeah. So that's really more. I'm all for people. It's a free country, right? Your gender critique of Big Brother episode season 40, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. It's fine. Go for it. But let's also not fool ourselves. That's easier than getting clean water to Flint, Michigan, apparently, because that's not getting done real quick. So, that's easier than helping people in the Rust Belt in the middle of the country where a bunch of factories are gone. All those things are easier. That's the reason that I think they're done. It's also, hey, here's another reason that the White House press secretary might be directing the conversation towards something like that, because it's easier for her to direct the conversation towards something like, oh, Joe Rogan is a villain or whatever, than it is to deal with fundamental problems.
And like 7% inflation.
Whatever the problem may be
now.
of the day. And, look, that isn't particularly a problem with the current administration any more than it is other administrations. Everyone deflects. And so that's something that's been done for a long time. But I don't know. That's the way I see it. I feel good. I don't know. I understand. Look, to be fair, also the pandemic has put everybody under a lot of stress. Everybody, it's all right. It's okay for everybody to feel stressed and a little upset.
Yeah, we just need to kind of, scale it back, because it's unfortunate for a culture to be so tense and stressed and treating everything like it's a dire, urgent life or death emergency, beyond things that are actual life and death dire emergencies, particularly when there are so many real dangerous situations that other people in the rest of the world go through that would love to come to this country to solve those life or death situations that they have in their countries. And what always kind of breaks my heart about it is that we're kind of damaging what we have here when we could be trying to preserve what makes it good, and so that other people that have really dire situations can come here. There's that also, like, from it's, remembering when I visited my family in Cuba, it's like, I can't imagine them leaving a situation where they don't even have like basic medicine and they don't even have clean water, and then coming here and being like, Joe Rogan needs to be censored. Like, that's insane. Like, no one cares about that. That's a luxury to care about that. It truly is. And we get so, I genuinely think that it's in a kind of way, an illness of luxury to be so narrowed in on these problems, like as if they're life and death, when they genuinely don't affect your life. Like, they don't. Like, you could just not listen to Joe Rogan or, whatever it is, or like turn off Twitter, whatever. And it's just that I find that the culture itself seems less fun. And you see that in art, man. That's why I like this film, because it was such a refreshing return to a kind of art that doesn't need to remind you that everything is bad. It's the kind of, it's not escapism purely, but it's the kind of art that lets you check out of an uglier world and enter a different, new, more interesting, fun world for a moment. And I love when art does that. This movie does it well. And so we recommend that you see this movie, check it out, see what you think. Let us know what you think in the comments. Are you having fun? Are you miserable too? Let us know. Subscribe, like, and if you really want to join the resistance against misery in this culture, join the Silver Eye Society. Sign up as a patron on patreon.com/Silver Eye Society. And we'll see you on the next one. Do you want to say bye?
No, I've said my piece.
Just hanging out in peace.
Bye.
Bye.